Hi, Danielle.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good actually. I thought, well, we were talking about kind of last time in the podcast of how the weeks have been and the energy had sort of been feeling fairly tense, chaotic, and lots of things going on. Um, but it sort of feels like that settled a little bit. And in that process, I've been listening to a few different people I've come across over the last year, spiritual speakers who talk about meditation or any of the sort of systems that they use that help people move towards um, out of a crazy place, out of the storm,
Hmm.
and into a much, land in a much better place, and how they can manage that process and what tools they can use and apply on a regular basis, where if they do that, they can start to notice a big difference. And it was sort of prompted, I think we'd started to enter into that a little bit in our previous podcast about different things that we use.
Right. When we were
But I'd been
using the canon analogy.
exactly,
Yeah.
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 And we were looking at what happens when something's really intense. So I was listening to Davaji, who was on a talk recently, and he was also looking at this idea. He talks about how we start the healing process after we've been in the storm, and reflecting over the last year, really. So even though we're in different countries, everybody's had an experience of what the government's response is to COVID and lockdown, and it's limited people's lives to some degree.
Hmm.
And there have been people who have used that time to go inward and reflect and use that space, and other people have used that space. Lots of creativity has emerged out of that process.
Hmm.
People have found parts of themselves that they've discovered that they didn't know they had. And then
Right.
there are other people have just been really scared and anxious and fearful. And even though there's the idea that we're sort of coming out of some of those intense lockdowns in different states, or the UK is different to different parts of Europe, it also still means that some people will have that tension, will have that stress. And of course, we know with the research that, too much prolonged stress and tension is not good for the immune system, and it keeps you
Right.
in that state of heightened anxiety. So, um, I wanted to sort of bring through some of the ideas that he was talking about, but also when we've talked before, some of the tips that we use and things that we apply on a daily basis. So, Daviji actually talks about sort of five different areas, and within this sort of system of creating healing for the mind, body, and spirit. Uh, when we're coming out of that storm, and that storm can be anything. And so the storm that people are maybe starting to experience coming out of now wasn't necessarily thunder, lightning, lots of rain, and heavy, or it might have felt like that at that point, but in that consistent space of it's always raining, or you can't open your door because the gales are too strong, or you can't step outside because the sea's too rocky, and you're exposed to this uncertainty and these conditions that make it difficult to run your life from day to day. So
Absolutely.
one of the areas that he sort of talked about, and I think we've hinted at this in previous episodes, about the kind of things that help us navigate the past and move out of that space, move into a new space, which can equally be scary for people, is creating a sense of stillness, so that and there is a tarot card in the deck, isn't it? Is it the Wheel of Fortune, where it says, all chaos can be crazy and surrounding you, but really what we're learning to do is sit in the center of the wheel.
Yes.
And the way to sort of weather the storm and the ups and downs of life is to keep that centered position. And we talk about
Hmm.
creating this centeredness
Yeah.
in meditation, in mindfulness, and in yoga. And that's usually the starting process for that, is just noticing our breath. People don't
Right.
realize that when they're stressed, they can hold their breath, they don't breathe as deeply, and they
Right.
don't have a long deep breath. So the process of experiencing stillness, which is what I've been building into my daily practice, and have moments of that scattered throughout the day. And it's a beautiful space to enter, especially if you've experienced a moment of chaos, or a
Right.
letter's come through and it's rocked your boat and you're stressful, is just by taking in that first breath. So I
Yeah.
thought we could think about stillness. So my technique, and then I'll ask you, it'd be helpful for you to share how you create that stillness for yourself and in your own
Mhm.
life. For me, sometimes just as simple as um, turning off all the outer distractions, closing the laptop down. It could be 11 in the morning, it could be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it could be 11 at night, and to switch off and maybe have some music playing in the background, and just leaning back in my favorite chair and just starting to notice my breath, and just breathing in and allowing that, and then just breathing out. And that point of stillness can happen when we breathe in. In yoga, sometimes what we do is we suspend the breath. And at that point, they call it the sort of zero feels. There is no past, there is no future, there just is. And then
Mhm.
we breathe out and we let go. And then we breathe in. And it's just that process of breathing in and breathing out. And I find that the more that I do that, I do something like that every day, that the process of moving out of a state of, and I'm not talking about what we've talked about in previous episodes, which is trauma and
Right.
things being erupting and evoked at a high level. That requires sometimes a stabilization process. So
Right. Right.
you've got to stabilize first. Then you sit down and you breathe in and you notice your breath. And you can also just, even now, wherever you're sitting or lying, is just even start to feel what your body feels like. Notice where your body feels heavy or where your body feels light, how your feet feel when they're on the floor. Do you feel a cool sensation? Is the air coming round your feet, or are you in a hot climate? Do you feel the sweat beads on your brow? Can you even feel the muscles in the top of your head? And it's moving into an element of mindfulness, mindful moments, and savoring. And the thing about stillness, it's like you start to savor those experiences of when you start to notice, so okay, I'm a bit tight, my shoulders a bit tight, so I can notice that, and then I can breathe into that space and then let that go. And then I notice my knee, and it's all these different spaces you can do. And what happens is, as I'm talking you through that process of what does it feel like if you notice your chest, what your arms like as they rest on the arms of the chair, everything else that you would have been working on prior to that just can start to dissipate. So
Right.
that stillness of creating some stillness is really important.
Yeah. Breath is definitely a key ingredient to creating some form of stillness. I've noticed that I do a lot of the same. I don't practice yoga and I don't practice breath work in that way, but I do pick up the the tidbits of information I've learned through both to help, you know, reach what works for me. And I always start with just, okay, let's take one breath. What does this breath feel like? Am I breathing in deep? Immediately I'll notice if I'm breathing in a shallow breath, which I typically would do if I'm under a stressful
Mm.
situation or there's a lot going on or I feel like I'm, being rushed or it's hectic. And then once I can say, okay, that's it, I now know to take that deeper breath. Now it's time to breathe as deep down into my diaphragm as I can, and then release that slowly. Now let's breathe in a little bit deeper, and then until it reaches your toes kind of breath. And then you come out and you breathe a longer breath out. And as you were just saying, that's when I begin to notice, like, maybe I'm clenching my jaw. Maybe I'm rubbing the back of my tongue across the back of my teeth or across the top of my mouth. I'm noticing that my shoulders are a little tighter than they are. And through that depth of breath, my chest is naturally releasing that tightness that happens when we breathe shallow breath. Because when you're breathing this shallow breathing, you're not receiving the oxygen that your body needs to function at this higher level that you deserve to be in.
Mm,
Um, I will say that I will always go to that 5 by 5 by 5, the three, you're going to
mm,
take 5 second breath in, hold it for 5 seconds, and release it for 5 seconds 3 times, and watch it really kind of reset the depth of breath you're taking, how it immediately puts you into recognition that you are tight in certain zones and it might need to release them, or it might show that you're
mm.
having the feelings of anxiety or anxiousness in your heart space or in your upper stomach area. And it just kind of allows that, just the breath alone kind of allows you to soothe those things naturally.
Yeah, and I think there was a plan as well that we're going to record just doing the 5 by 5 by 5 breath so that people can start to experience that. Because even because I practiced this a while, even when you start to notice your breath, and like you say, you start to notice whether there's tightness or lightness, how your body feels. I'm now more aware than I was 5 minutes ago. I can actually hear, even though my windows are closed, the trees blowing in the wind. And it's a sound that I absolutely love, but I don't
Yeah.
hear it when I'm sat here. And now that I
Mm.
can feel there's a softer feeling to this, just by starting to focus on that, I've tuned into that. And I've noticed when I've sat in the back garden, there's a whole range of bird sounds as well now that I tune into. So there's something about how then your senses start to operate in different ways. So it's an interesting sort of exploratory process
It
that
is.
also, done daily, several times a day, can really start to enable people to just move out of any anxiety, because anxiety is often about the future. Fear is often about things that happened in the past that we can project into the future. So by creating this presentness and presenteeism within this process, we can then focus on creating the stillness and
Right.
see what happens next.
And you can even start to imagine your breath being like, I'm breathing in, this white light or whatever it is that
Yeah.
you associate with a clearer, higher frequency breath. You breathe in this white energy or this golden energy. And when you hold the breath, imagine that you're transmuting all energy inside of you. And when you release the breath, you're releasing the transmuted energy back into
Yes.
the universe.
Yeah.
And so sometimes if you attach the meaning to the breath, it kind of helps get your space into, okay, I am calming myself. I
Yeah.
am releasing myself. I am
I'm
taking this
clearing.
high anxiety and returning it and turning it into something more calm for myself so that I can make my way through this day. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things we can do with breath
But
and
that's a really nice, because I think in a way as well, we're sort of introducing those stages, isn't it? And it's a
yeah,
really nice way of sort of saying, hey, all we have to do is sit back, notice your breath and breathe
breathe.
further than your chest.
Yeah.
Take it further down and start that. So that was sort of one area that like he looked at, and it's something that we've been practicing a while, like you say. And that's a nice point that you made, that we talk about the same thing, but we're actually applying our skills in different ways
Right.
for the
Yeah.
same result, but different mechanisms to do
Because
that.
there's no one right way. Everybody has the way
Exactly.
that works for them.
Yeah.
And you and I might come from different arenas, but it's funny because we always end up in the same places, like we
Yeah.
might start here, start there through what we mindfully practice. But at the end of the day, the goal is the same goal.
Yeah.
And through trying to create stillness, it will always go back to breath. And regardless of how you've learned how to do the breathing technique or what it's called, at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you are doing breath and you're just
Yeah.
breathing. And if you take the deeper breath and you make your imagination go into the way that it's healing itself, or you just know that this breath is going to release these things, it's going to get you to the same space that,
Yeah.
what our personal experience is, how we detail it. Whatever you
Exactly.
do, the end result's still the same. It's a more of a stillness for ourselves, a relaxing.
Yeah, and it can be something that prompts that, um, because, like you say, it's natural, and in other arenas, they might call it a conscious breath, and the conscious breath is breathing in and out your mouth, and the same thing, which is like waves.
Yeah.
So you can have a whole session just doing that. And already, as you can hear, just by me starting to focus on my breath, and interestingly, some of the stuff that we've been listening to is about the throat chakra. So
Yeah.
you breathe in and you start to clear whatever these blockages are that collects in our system. We talked a few times about the different things that collects in our sort of aura, our system, our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, all of that stuff that's not ours, some stuff
Right.
that's ours.
Yeah.
So that's a nice phase to start with, is people just to experience and have that stillness and work towards having more of that if the life is mainly busy and chaotic. And if it isn't, it's a conscious way of applying some very simple techniques and then seeing what happens. So the other element, to sort of cover as well then, is about gratitude. So
Ah,
what Davaji talked about, and again, it's other yogis, other philosophers,
are you clearing your
people
throat
in this.
chakra?
Yes, I think so. Um, the science is emerging that's showing us that practicing gratitude, you wake up in the morning, and if your thoughts are of a depressive nature, and you, to prevent that cycle, you can think of different experiences, and that you've got some gratitude for, and you can either do it something every day, but again, there's a lot of power behind that, of how it
Mhm.
shifts our state. And it can be the very simple things. If it's really hard to find something that you have gratitude for, it can be the really simple things of, I'm really grateful I can feel the carpet beneath my feet. I've got some food in the cupboard. The sun is shining through the window. And it's that process that sort of Esther Hicks talks about in the law of attraction.
Yeah.
She talks about the sort of 18-second rule in a way, which is where you keep focusing. You can either use 18 seconds to have all the negative cycles going through your mind and get locked into that thought,
Mhm.
or you can apply that same skill that is detrimental in a positive way and look at different thought processing by focusing on, I'm grateful for this, the sun is shining, my kitchen surfaces are lovely, the flower is growing, uh, my dog is beautiful, my child has drawn me this beautiful picture. And it moves us out of the procrastination, it moves us out of all of the scenarios that we're creating, especially if we're an anxious person, to start doing that. But it also has a deeper mechanism of focusing the mind. By the time you've sort of ran over the 18, 20, 24 seconds and apply this consistently every day, each time you do that, it is so much harder for the brain to keep conjuring up the stuff that occupies your thoughts most of
Yep.
the time.
Yeah. And, I think we've talked about this a few times, but you wake up and you list three things that you're grateful for, right? It doesn't have anything massive.
Yeah.
It's a transition. And the reality of this is you're training your brain. You're
Mm.
becoming you're trying to master your thought patterns. You're trying to create new
And
highway
create
systems.
some new matter, some gray
Yeah,
matter that, yeah,
exactly. Yeah. The new highway systems that lead you into these new thought
exactly.
processes. Is very important to know that we are quite capable of being masters of ourselves. And part of that mastery is retraining thought patterns, retraining, I uh, when I started the work, every day it was just negative, negative, negative.
Mm.
I would wake up negative. My thought patterns would be negative. I would have to really fight myself to get back into
It's
this
tough
positive.
at first.
It
It
is,
is
but
tough.
I learned pretty quickly on that if I started my morning with my three gratitudes and an affirmation statement in front of a mirror, or even laying in the bed, depending on how quickly I had to get up out of bed, um, it really began my day in a different space,
Yeah.
a more calm, natured space where I'm able to find the joys in these smaller things. Now, I'm not saying it's an overnight thing, but when you start putting the gratitude behind every everything that you do, even when you're going through rough spots, there is gratitude to be found in it.
Mm.
When you find yourself going into this grateful nature, you'll become that grateful nature, and it's just a
Yeah.
natural transition, and science is backing that. So it's, this is,
Yeah.
and it's something really easy in concept. And even to list three things in the beginning can be hard when you're in a deeper depression.
Mm. Mm.
So I always recommend writing down the three things
Yeah.
you're grateful for, and putting it maybe in your mirror. Sometimes people will write it on lipstick on their mirror, which I think is awesome. I couldn't do that. It would, it's whatever that part of me is. I'm like, no lipstick on the mirror. So, but, but
No,
yeah,
you're
it
right.
really,
Having something up visual that captures your attention
yeah,
and
if you're
reminds you.
it reminds you. And so
Yeah.
some people put little those post-it sticky notes
Yeah.
on their mirrors in their bathroom. I've noticed that the bathroom is a key place to place
Yeah.
your daily, or even like a refrigerator if you're
Somewhere
trying to
that you're
do.
going to look at a lot of the time.
Yeah, you're going to be
Yeah.
consistently looking at, you're not
Yeah.
going to be skipping over, and might be skipping the fridge first thing in the morning, but you're not skipping that mirror first thing in the morning, because you have to brush
Exactly.
your teeth, wash your face, do things like make
Yeah.
sure you're not, crazy looking before you're leaving. So, gratitude is a, a bigger deal than we make it out to be, as a general, as a consistency across the board. Gratitude will change your life. Gratitude is a
Yes,
life changing thing
it
to have.
is.
It really
Yeah.
does change your
In
existence.
isolate, well, obviously we need to breathe, but the two
Well,
together.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I think your key points, and this is what we've seen, in a lot of the work that we do with people, whether it is in well-being or whether it's a sort of clinical application, is creating those new neural pathways.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
what some of the research has showed about early childhood is if the child has been devoid of loving attachments and strong relationships, the brain won't necessarily develop those spaces in
Hmm.
there where the child can experience love and joy and happiness and all that. So sometimes we have to put pathways where there aren't any, or what we have to do is, rather than going down the same pathway, which is all of that embedded negative stuff. And you're right, it does take time and it takes
Right.
practice.
I would
But
actually
I
like to.
guarantee, well, I was just
I'm
going to
so
say,
sorry.
that's all right. I guarantee though, at some stage, and it can be quicker for some people than others, that you will notice the benefit of this by applying this every day.
Right. And I would like to dive into how we find gratitude daily, in a podcast one time. I think that would be a really great thing,
Yeah.
because sometimes it feels so out of reach. And
Yeah.
sometimes it does, especially, from personal experience, being a child that, didn't receive a substantial amount of love growing up. It is something that you have to train yourself to do. And
Yeah.
at first it doesn't feel like it's working. It doesn't feel like it's working. It's not
Or
working.
it
My
feels
day is
odd.
still,
Or it's
yeah.
like,
Or it feels like you're being selfish, or you're doing
yeah.
something bad,
Yeah.
or, why is it okay to say, I am grateful that, you know, I would find myself feeling guilty for being grateful that I had these nice things around me, that I almost wasn't deserving of them. But at the same time, I'm grateful for them. And it would be almost this catch 22 I would walk myself through. But the more I did it, the more I realized I wasn't being selfish. I wasn't
Yeah.
being any of this. And it's just how I was conditioned.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to be grateful for the things that are in your existence, be it material, emotional, spiritual. You are allowed to feel grateful for these
Yeah,
things.
because we're just not brought up that way, are we? A lot of people, or it might be you should be grateful you've got food on your plate, and
Right.
there's so many starving children out there, and that's not the way to elicit this. So, yeah, I think both of us and anyone who's listened to any of the podcasts we've done before will
Hmm.
have heard that both of us have periods in our life where
Hmm.
it wasn't, about joy, happiness, and gratitude. It was about
Right.
days under the duvet, not wanting to get out, not having the energy, not being motivated. And if somebody would have said to me 30 years ago, focus on gratitude, breathe, I probably would have looked at them like they were fairly strange and annoying as well.
Yeah.
However, I think if someone had taught me about sticking to something and trying it and being a bit of a scientist in your own experience towards your own mastery, I might have
Hmm.
taken it on board, because sometimes it looks so simple. It's what you want about. We expect there to be a big a big thing you have to do in order to have enough or a big change. And
Right.
it's not,
It's
it's you,
not.
you join them up, you join the dots. You can do these separate, because if you haven't applied, if you're changing some of your behaviors, sometimes it's easy to bring in one behavior a week. So the first week could be that you're focusing on your breathing and you're just breathing in and
Mhm.
out, and you set your timer and you say, right, once an hour for 10 seconds, I'm going to focus on my breath. And you can set yourself that goal. Then in week 2, you can say, right, now, week 2, I'm going to focus on gratitude. Obviously, you're going to breathe anyway,
Right. You're
but
breathing anyways. And
you'll
now you're a
carry
little bit
that.
more mindful that you need to
Now
be
it's more
because
mindful.
and now you're in week 2. And by end of week 3, it's natural for you to take time out to or check yourself. Am I breathing deeply enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can blend the gratitude into that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what you can do sort of at that point. So the other elements are also about about trust. So
Hmm.
trust is an interesting thing, because when you say to people, it's about trust. What are we trusting? Are we trusting somebody else? And often when people have hard times in relationships or things have gone wrong, it's about the trust that they put in the person. Or is it that we're putting the trust in ourselves, or we're putting trust in a higher power? Is it that we're making more of a commitment to ourselves? But trust is also part of the journey, the trust that um, I trust that I'm able to commit to myself to sitting back in the chair a few times a day and focusing on this and going for a walk. So there is an important level as well in this
Right.
about trust,
Right.
and that the universe will deliver if we let go of you know all of the things that cloud our true sense of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, because trust is it's a fickle thing in this day and age. And I'm sure forever it's been a thing. But for me, it always starts with self. Once I learn to trust myself,
Yeah,
depending on whatever level it is you're working in, whatever
yeah.
comes to mind, I trust myself to do this. I trust myself to believe this. I trust myself for this. Then once you've mastered that trust within self, then you can begin to, if you believe in a higher power, it's easier to begin to trust in a higher power. And then you can start working your way out to the interpersonal. I can now trust what this person is saying to me. Now I can trust what this person is delivering their message to me.
Mm.
Um, but until you've learned to trust self, I wouldn't recommend putting fingers out too far beyond that, just because you're going to start having that bite back. But yeah,
Yeah.
depending on where you're at inside of your level of work, trust comes in tiers, trust comes in layers, and you have to just work through each one. And that is definitely something that to this day I work on deeply is,
Mm.
I've learned to trust myself. I've learned to trust in my higher power, that because I do believe in a higher power, or at least a more all-knowing power. And so I'm still developing trust within others and inside of my relationships. And so this is an ongoing thing that you work through. But once you've gained that trust within yourself, the other
Mm.
pieces start to fall into place, because you trust your guidance, you trust your intuition, you trust that you're going to make the right decision.
And also, if we're talking about a sort of coming from a storm, coming from this place that experienced as a storm and moving into more settled land, is if you've had several storms, there can be part of you that's afraid to trust because we're expecting the storm. But you can also look at that in whatever happens, I trust that I will remain centered and manage whatever the
Yeah.
stuff is that goes on around me. And you can look back at past events. So it was like doing a timeline in a way. I draw a line with clients and say, right, tell me about all the experiences you've had where they've gone from your perception well, and they draw them above the line. And now all the other experiences you've had, not all of them, because we've got hundreds, under the line that didn't go so well, and what was going on when it was going well, and what were the feelings that elicited, and how did you trust to go for that idea or do that thing. So
Yeah.
it's also getting people to think about what was the sort of key ingredients involved that made that be a thing that seemed to work out, and what are some of the key ingredients. So now some things are out of our control because we can have
Right.
illness and struck by lightning, and you know, we can have a
Well,
crash or
yeah,
release.
that's part of being in the center of the wheel. The goal to
Yeah,
being the center of the wheel is
but we
life is
still
full of
have,
ups and downs.
yeah,
Yeah.
but we still will have this neutral zone that we can
Hmm.
create. So trust is a tricky one, but there is something within thinking about how, what does trust mean,
Right. Well,
and
even the
how can
basic of
this
I trust that I'm going to
be
regulate
okay.
my breathing. I trust that I'm going to find gratitude in daily existence. I trust that I am going to keep myself on task because I trust in the knowing that I deserve to have these things.
Yeah.
There's some real basic trust guidelines that you can teach yourself that will open a can of worms, if you will, and these can of worms are actually really good for you. So yeah, there's trust is a many layered thing. But when you're reaching this, trying to find the stillness, trust in your breath. I trust that I'm going to breathe in and out. I trust that I'm going to allow my body to relax. I trust that I'm going to find gratitude today. Just basic trust things that will give you a momentary glimpse of stillness, which I call Zen. This
Mm,
momentary Zen, trusting that you'll find that space is
mm.
a big thing for the beginner side of
And that
that.
can be, and it can feel more of a challenge at times when you're coming out of the storm, or you're coming through a transition out of a situation that didn't feel great. Um, and you don't quite know where you're heading next or what the land's going to look like. So you
Mhm.
can either not trust it and feel shaky and ungrounded, or you can learn to trust that through all those experiences you've had that have worked out,
Yeah.
that actually I will be okay. And there was somebody that turned up at that time that helped me out and helped me get this furniture and help connect with people in the area. And it sort of starts to elicit, similar to the gratitude, a different state of being that opens you up to be more receptive to what is there for you. Whereas
Mm.
when you don't trust and you're anxious and you're fearful, it's almost like your energy field starts to contract and come in, and you
Mhm.
become small and enclosed.
Mhm.
When you start to trust yourself and you can start to feel expansive, it's like, I'm okay,
Yeah.
I'm in the world, I can feel the walls, I can see.
Yeah.
And your energy field can get expansive, and what that allows then is all of the things that we can't see around us at the moment because it's not in our field of vision and it's not in our periphery, are there for us to access, or resources that we can call forth towards us. But we can't be open and receptive to that while we're in a state of fear and overwhelm and shock and anxiety and worry and all of that. So we've got to apply these techniques to help this process, because if we're in this space and we know we've moved out of this storm and it's good, but we don't quite know where we're at, then it's even more important to not try and reach for things. And if you haven't got something tangible to reach for, like a new job, or you've bought the new house, or you're buying the you're painting it up, what will happen is your brain will do the same job of reaching for all the things that it thinks it should reach for.
Mhm.
So in a way, what we've got to do is capitalize on this moment of, when I'm still and I breathe, it feels like this, and when I feel gratitude, it feels like this. And it's like layering that up
Mhm.
so that you're less called, your brain is less called to those things around you that it wants to grasp at,
Right.
because your brain's job is like, you've got to be safe, you've got to be safe. And if you have experienced a lot of turbulence and you've not felt safe over time, then you've got to get your center of gravity and ramp that up. Hence why I really practice this uh, state of every day getting into this still place, because then going back to trust, it's also linked to your own intuition, your own internal guidance. And it's a bit like we've got our own Google Maps, really. We've got our own internal guidance that
Mhm.
has a sort of satellite that goes woo and scans the environment, and gives us this sense of, and we can feel the waves of what is obvious and not obvious without realizing it,
Yeah.
especially if you're a more sensitive person. And more people are waking up to their level of sensitivity and their
They
level of
are. Yeah.
intuition.
Well, and when you practice a little bit of breath work, a little bit of gratitude, and a little bit of trust, you'd
It
be
will
kind of
increase
amazed
it.
how it does. And it's
It will
quick.
increase it.
It is,
Yeah.
and especially in those moments of practicing that in that moment, you're going to start really breaking through to new understandings of self. You're going to start,
Yeah.
things come, what I picture as coming online. Things start
Exactly.
to waken up and say,
Yeah.
oh, this is an old system that's up and running because
Yeah.
I had to dust off the cobwebs, on it.
But
And now,
now,
yeah, but
yeah,
now,
now I'm having an upgrade.
yeah.
I've gone
And
from
it's,
Windows 5 to Windows 10 now.
yeah. And that's a pretty massive upgrade.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm having
yeah.
an upgrade. So join me in this moment. Okay. So you're in your center and you've taken your breaths and you're sat in the chair and you take your awareness right into your heart center, because your heart has it is responsible for this magnetic field that we have around us, that science is starting to be able to read the effects of different experiences it has on us. What fear and shock and trauma and all those things do is close us down and close the heart center down. So you tune in and you imagine, you can give it a color, and you can put your hand on it, you can feel the warmth. So you take your attention there and you allow that, and you imagine now that that's growing like a light bulb that you've just changed, and it's strong and it's lighting up and it's lighting up. And you imagine, a bit like when you've done the meditation with calling in the light and the breath, you breathe in. So you're breathing in the light now and you take it in, and you can even do the movement of expanding your chest, and you imagine now, and you still centered. Whenever your mind starts to get distracted, back to my feet, I feel how I feel on the chair, I take my breath, and I'm in my heart. And you imagine now that you're radiating that out. And some people will have a color and some will have a sensation. So I can now see pink and blue, and it radiates out. And you make that wider. So what that does, that expansiveness, it can create that sense of peace, that lifting up. You'll have a different experience of it. And all you've got to do is visualize doing that. You're in your solid state on the chair with your feet on the floor, or you lay on the sofa, and you're tuning into your heart.
Mm.
And now you're expanding that. Now, the next step is your brain might go, yeah, but what if, blah, so you've got this internal dialogue. So,
Mhm.
what you do is, if you have those thoughts coming in, the other part of you, the intelligent, wise part of you, says, go away, you're talking nonsense. And you can even imagine saying that, you're talking nonsense, go away, bugger off. Right. And they might still come in, because it's a bit like if we've had those thoughts and they are well played record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they're super highways
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah. The
You've
height of.
established that highway inside of your
So they're like
brain.
that.
Yeah.
I want attention. Yeah. I want
I want to ask you about why your response was this way back in 2012.
so you just allow, you know, that expansiveness, but you've got those thoughts coming in. So this is where, and I think I spoke about this on another podcast that we did. This is where having some kind of mantra, some
Mhm.
mantra sounds a bit esoteric, but rather than allowing the thoughts to take hold and be strong, is you then need to be saying something like, and it can be simple things like, I am calm, I'm
Yeah,
seated on this chair, I'm relaxed. If you don't feel those things, you have to call it through process. You have to
you
say,
do.
I'm getting calmer,
Yeah.
I'm becoming more
Remember,
relaxed.
we're training our brain. And
Exactly.
part of that requires, you're not going to go and power lift 300 pounds
Yeah.
out the gate.
So
It
we're in
takes
the
time.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can call it a mantra, you can call it an affirmation, you can call
Yeah.
it an I am statement, whatever relates to the path that you're on. But at the end of the day, you're just training your brain to say, I am larger than what the negative thought is.
Yeah.
The I am enough, I am at peace,
Yeah.
I am calm, I am getting calmer, I am filled with love. Any whatever the opposite, kind of almost like whenever you're on a debate and you have
Mm.
to
So
come
if your
back.
voice is saying, you know, you're no good, it's like, well, I'm getting better and better.
Right.
Because
I
if
am
your
getting better.
confidence is low in yourself, you've got
Yeah.
to frame it in that way. I
Again, if you can't find yourself loving yourself, let's go to a neutral statement. And
Yeah,
the neutral
I
statement being, I am trying, I
I
am
am
better.
here. You
Yeah.
can, or true statements, which is, I am here, I am sat on the
Mm,
chair, I am getting calmer, I can feel the wind on my face.
mm.
But again, it's the statements, as you're focusing on that, means that everything else that normally comes in shouldn't be getting a voice now. So this is
Right.
that
Kind of like
process.
shutting the door on the voice. You're not
Yeah, and you
listening. And
can
if it,
even imagine that you're doing that. And if it's really
yeah,
hard to do it, you can draw it beforehand.
yeah,
Here's the voice, here's the words, here's the phrases, because often there'll be phrases that are repeated over and over again, especially if you've in the past. I don't know if I think I told you this early on, but I used to talk at conferences, and I spoke at a conference once years ago. But at the same time, I used to be incredibly shy as a girl, and when I started doing my therapy training, even talking in the group and talking about cases or my ideas used to send me into a panic, like literally boom, 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 like the cartoons, my heart pounding, sweating, my throat would squeeze.
mm,
Anyway, so did experience that a few times, but the adult part of me is like, what's wrong with you? It's okay, just get through it. But the physiological experience was really
mhm.
powerful. And anyway, so I was asked to talk at this conference. This was, God, about 8 years ago. And I was sat in the front, and I was part of an organization. So I knew four of the other speakers, and it was about what my work that I was doing in schools. And and I was fine until the person was speaking before that I was due to get up. And all of a sudden my heart started pounding. Anyway, I goes into one of the side rooms to focus on my breath, to calm myself down, to work on my thoughts. My body was having none of it.
Mm.
So I probably stopped myself because I've learned techniques, so I don't go into panic. But this is how people can end up in panic.
Right.
It just gets too much. The physiology is now on full alert.
Yep.
Your body's going wah wah wah, like that
Yeah. Yeah.
really annoying
All the
noise.
alarm bells. Yep.
All the alarm bells. So I'm trying to practice this. So anyway, remaining fairly conscious, but all of these sensations are going wild anyway. So I'm like breathing. I sit in the chair and I'm like breathing, trying to bring my heart rate down, which felt impossible at the time. And it's only now looking back of doing several things over the years that I think my body has just learnt to trust, you see. My system has learnt to trust that I'll be okay. But my
Right.
system didn't feel like that at the time. So I get up and I start talking, and then the rest I don't really remember, because apparently I was talking for 20 minutes, and
And
then I
you
became
apparently did
aware
well.
at some point someone wanted me to stop talking, and then the whole room, as I became aware, was looking at me, like over 200 people, and there was silence. And in my head, it's like, what's just happened? And
Mm.
it was just this whole experience of not really knowing what was going on, and and talking, but not really, almost being in control. So, what's the worst thing that people often fear is doing public talking and it all going wrong, um, or not, making a mistake, tripping up, or anything like that. And anyway, so
Well,
break
I've
time
also,
comes.
oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you,
No, it's just,
woo, Danielle
well,
Renee.
it was the it was the example of having the experience, and sometimes your physiology is so wired that no matter how many techniques you've got, that
Right.
can kick in. And when we had the break, there was a guide from one of the local newspapers that said, you know, he really liked my talk, but he's glad he recorded it because I talk so fast. So
Must
I'm
get this
like,
out now.
which I used to do when I was really,
Hmm.
really anxious. Like now I talk a lot slower than I used to. So anyway, and this is the other element. One is we've got the physiology that is just kicking off, right, with us trying to control it. So probably the tools that I applied stop it getting worse and helped me sort of feel grounded, but they weren't enough to switch off the alarm system.
Right.
Then I have that experience, and then I'm thinking, oh, my career is over. I really thought that is it, my career's over. And then not knowing, what did I say? Did I say, because I used to over prepare, I used to overwrite stuff. I used to, when I was doing presentations, I would prepare for weeks and weeks and weeks and go over it and practice. I didn't trust I could just say stuff, right? So I'd have
Right.
to over prepare. And then so anyway, the conference is finished, and people around you are always nice, aren't they? So even if you've been the so-called worst person speaking that day, because there's always somebody that's going to be better than the other person, you know, we sometimes people just rate people in that way.
Right.
And anyway, so I'm driving home, and that's the next layer is, oh my god, what did I do? That is it, end of career, and I'm in this state. So then I thought, well, it's happened now anyway. So I got back into work because it was my day job. It was other voluntary work I was doing. So I lived with that experience for quite a while, and I've had smaller experiences like that where I've just had this physiology that just kicked off, and the wired feeling came in. But what was sort of fascinating about this one event is the lady that ran the organization used to have somebody recording it, and she'd have someone typing it up what every speaker discussed so she could do the newsletter verbatim, like everything they said. Anyway, about 2 years later, they were a bit slow. Through the post, I got the transcript of the day, and I was like, did I say all that? And it was actually really good.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. Something I've always learned for myself is to rephrase something. So we call it anxiety, right?
Yeah.
One day I decided to flip the script and call it nervous excitement.
Nervous excitement. Well, yeah, and our tutor used to say the same thing. She said anxiety and excitement are two sides of the same coin.
They are. And so when
Yeah.
I rewrote that script, I found that part of your brain that's curious being more curious about the excitement than the nervousness. And
Yeah,
that it's like we can say it's natural to be nervous about new events or new things or
of
something that you're
course.
about to step into. So we kind of
Yeah.
already got ourselves equipped from a young age to say nervousness is natural. And then when I would put nervous excitement with it, it was like, well, I am excited to be doing this. This is why I'm doing it. So if I took the
Yeah.
anxiety terminology out of the way and I replaced it with nervous excitement, my body began to respond different because my brain is now responding different.
Mm,
It was very interesting for me to do that, but I learned to take on the new term. I'm feeling nervous excitement for what's happening as opposed to this is bringing on anxiety for me. And that seemed to be a way to turn around my body's physiological response system
yeah.
to
Reframing.
anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So reframing is a process as well, that a technique that you can use in therapy where you do reframe scenarios. And
Okay.
um, what happens sometimes when people come out of, say, the storm or an experience that's been familiar that they don't want
Mm-hmm.
anymore, is even if they want, like I did, I was having these new experiences and learning new information that was interesting and right up what I wanted to do.
Right.
But you can then be asked to do something, and it can be anything for anyone. It could have been somebody's been asked to write something, they could have been really nervous to do the teas and coffees that day. It doesn't matter what the thing is. If the thing
Right.
that you've been asked to do comes in your direction, because this is what also happens when you tap into your heart and you expand yourself and you imagine that your energy field is expanding, new opportunities can come in your way. But then the old brain, the old part
Mm-hmm.
of the information might come along and go, hang on a minute. So there's a part of you wants to step forward and experience those new experiences, or the intuition wants to discern which out of those different opportunities are coming in my direction do I want to take. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you can have lots of things come in your direction at
Mm-hmm.
once. You can be sat there thinking there is nothing to do. I've moved, almost like I've moved to a new city. I've got no friends now. I've got no job, and you're starting right from scratch, and you're expanding yourself, and you're just being okay in that space. Opportunities can come from all over the place once you start to just trust that you're okay where you are. However, it's then using your discernment to work through that. But even if there's opportunities to come, whether it is join a meetup group and go kayaking, or speak at a conference, or make tea and coffee at the local voluntary organization, whatever that is, there's a part of you that goes, oh, I'm really interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of your brain will go, no, 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 I'm not sure about that. So of course, sets off that fight or flight that we've
Right.
talked about in several episodes. So not only are we sort of thinking about how you come through the storm and the fears and the anxieties that are there, and use these techniques to reduce or eliminate and clear those fears and those anxieties, but then when that's cleared, then what is that?
Right.
So that's when we're in an interesting space. Now, where
Right.
am I?
Now
What,
where are
where
you?
am I? What is this place? And if you have literally moved to a new house and you're waiting to start a new job, you really are starting from, well, what is that? Where's the local shop? Where do I get my hair done? Where
Yeah.
do I pay my bills? Where can I go and get? So you are really in that space. But what also comes in that, you don't know when you're walking down the shop who you're going to bump into, what information you're going to hear, and what direction you're going to travel in. You might think that road looks really interesting because your curiosity's kicked in. So it's all of the beautiful things that can start to occur when you apply what are very simple techniques, but are the grounding forces to center yourself and reduce or clear those emotional states that were there at the time for a reason but don't need to be there
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And you can look at that and say, it was a storm, and I might have gone a bit overboard and told all my neighbors blur at that moment, and oh, maybe I did this and maybe I did that, or maybe I didn't do anything and I've been at home and I've done nothing for months, and now I'm stepping back out, especially in the last year when people have the distractions, the external stuff hasn't been there. Because I even find
Right.
if I'm going out now, the idea of being in a group of people and the noise level, it's the noise level for me. I've
Right.
always been noise sensitive. So now it feels like someone's turned the lights up really bright and the volume's gone from 5 to 10 sometimes. So I use those steps of how can I center myself, get my breath, and then how can I you navigate the times of the day when I'm less exposed to that, to the other times of the day where I might be more exposed. Going back to your point about awareness,
Right.
your awareness is key to who you are and who you're growing into. So there's a real opportunity when you land in this new space to sit and be still and just experience what you're experiencing,
Right.
and then think what and then think of steps. What
Yeah.
are the what do I have to do today because it needs to be done? So you need a new tire for your car, so you have to do that. Safety. What do I want to do today? Well, I want to be out in nature. Okay, I'll take a drive after I've got the new tire and I'm going to walk around the lake. What could I do? Oh, a friend's offered to go coffee, the kids want to go swimming or whatever. And so you can then start to see those things in a different way with a different perspective,
Yeah.
and then discern which ones, because of course there's always things if you've got children, you've got a job, or there's always things that you
Right.
have to do and you have to do right now. But it's how do you balance that? So then if you've then got too many of those things, you take the breath again and you go back into this centered place
Yeah.
and you leave it alone, and you give yourself even 3 minutes of just the breathing,
Yeah.
and it will clear.
It
And
really
this
does.
consistent
Yeah.
practice
Yeah.
really can make a difference.
So breath, gratitude, trust.
Yeah.
And then we've got two more. What's the next one?
Two more. I think we'll cover those in part two.
I like that. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those three right there are creating a stillness that allows that space to become the observer. And no
Yeah.
matter what that situation is, you can be, as you were just talking about it, right before you're about to go on stage, find the opportunity of stillness so that you can get yourself back into. And I will say that the majority of the times that I go into any type of speaking, I end up, it's funny because I've always considered it almost like a channeling, where if
Mm-hmm.
I am clear in my thought and I'm just talking and I'm not paying attention to what's around me because I know it's my time to speak, that it feels more like I'm just being guided to say what I'm saying. And it's okay if I don't have
Mm-hmm.
memory of it because it was being guided. And that's been my whole life, even as, even talking school, when you would be in speech classes or something and you'd have to give a 5 to 10 minute speech in
Mm.
front of people and everybody get worked up and nervous. I would just remember I would prepare myself, I'd get up there and then I would go blank beyond anything of what I other than what I was speaking. And I would forget what I was saying. I would forget that, all of that. I would not have a clue what I just talked about. But I would always take that as a success for myself. If I don't remember and I wasn't stumbling over words and I wasn't constantly overthinking that,
Yeah.
then I must have been
Yeah.
doing something right.
Well, that's the point actually, because as I learned about myself and I learned to trust that the information is there, it resides in me, everything I've learned and thought and been a part of will come. What I was doing, I was blocking myself with these practices
Mm,
of, um, I must do this and must do that in order to try and create this sort almost like level of perfection that were actually
right.
now coming in the way. And I think early on in my career, they helped,
Yeah.
that way of setting things up, because it was a way of managing, you see. And this is what happens if you're centered and you're still and you're in flow, you don't even have the desire or even start eliciting some of those ideas about setting things up. It just doesn't happen anymore. Or it will, because I can feel when I'm doing it. So now what I do, and we again talked a few weeks ago, is I'm now using drawings to capture the image of what I want to do. So now I use the imagery or the motif or the symbol to be the prompt that contains all the information of what I want to cover. But it provides the sort of launch pad. It's like I've got the introduction and then go. But again, this takes us back to trust, because
Right.
I then had to trust. A bit like when I was working as a therapist and I said to you, I'd been working for quite a few years and I'd learned all these different theories, and then I read loads of different ideas about working with young people and realized, you have to work a bit differently. But I remember starting to go blank, and going blank was unnerving for me. And then I realized when I was in that blank space, I was really receiving the client, and I used to have some of the best therapeutic moments when I was just in this place of pure, almost like pure flow.
Mm,
There was an exchange, there was a dance in that interaction that
mm,
I didn't in that moment. It was like nothing's coming to me. And it used to be like I used to try and capture what we talked about the week before. How have you been since we talked about X? But in a way, what that really was doing was taking them back to the week before. And some people progress so quick, you that you don't need to take them there.
right.
What you need to do is receive them where they are.
Right.
So when you receive them where they are, you go blank sometimes, because you're now entering into a whole new territory with them. They've not been in that space with you this week, and you've not been in that space.
Right.
But it was about trust, and it was about trusting the process. And when I started trusting it, I received everyone differently that walked through the door, and I could tell where it changed each time then.
That's beautiful. Trust is a a beautiful thing. And
isn't
it does
it?
take time, but it's worth the time. It's worth the effort. And as I always tell people, you're deserving of trusting yourself, trusting the situation, and knowing
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, something beyond you has your back. Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if it's okay for the last few minutes, I think I'd just like to revisit the breathing
Yeah. Let me
so
get
we
into a
can do that.
position here to take a deeper breath.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you find your comfortable spot because um when people's bodies are a bit stiff and sore, it can make meditating and even sitting really difficult. And the moment you slow down, you can start to notice all your aches and pains.
Mhm.
So if you do, you just notice it and you accept that, and it's like it's okay. So just breathe in slowly and notice now as you breathe in how far down you can take your breath. And as you breathe out, let your shoulders drop and let your feet relax on the floor. And imagine that your ankles are just, oh, they're relaxing. They're like relaxing really deeply. And as you take another deep breath in, imagine that that breath is going even deeper. And it's going right down the central channel of your body, into your hips, right down your legs, into the floor. And with every breath, any anxiety, fear, or tension just melts. It just melts right into the floor. And you can just feel what your body feels like as you sit in the chair. Feel your arms as whether you're leaning on the back of the chair or against the wall. And even just noticing that within a few short breaths, as you now take your next breath, and you just let yourself drop even more into that deeper feeling of relaxation. And you might even notice that your eyelids just relax and drop. And even the muscles in the top of your head just seem to be relaxing. And all the stress and tension contained within your system just runs down, trickles down your central channel, down your legs into the floor. And as you take another deep breath, you might wonder just where that breath goes, expanding your lungs, clearing out all of the old toxins, releasing those and letting them go. And just feeling that sense of deep relaxation. Sometimes some people start to feel really peaceful or bliss even now as you relax and go deeper into that experience. And you're just aware. And any thoughts that may pop in your head, just imagine you've either attached them to balloons or you've got a bouncer on the door of your mind and he's telling them to go away. They don't live there. There's no place. Because you can go into your heart, you can take your awareness to your heart center as you breathe in and you relax even more. And your heart is where you trust that what you need to know, what you need to do will just occur to you. And as you tap into the heart center, imagine now that as you take your breath deeper into your body, it's clearing and releasing any concerns or anxieties or fear and allowing them to just dissipate. But your heart center, wow, that just can start to radiate. That can get stronger and stronger, start to pulsate in your body. And just imagine now that you're expanding that state as though it's radiating out into your aura. And you can give that a color. You can imagine there's a beautiful swirling color radiating all around your body, up and down, round and round as you breathe in and you breathe out. So that was just a really short meditative experience of just focusing on your breath and be mindful. of how you feel as you sit in the chair. And it took 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes each time in your day, you do that, and wondrous things can occur.
It's true. It's definitely, I'm very relaxed right now. You took me into a very relaxed space.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think on that, we'll do part two.
Sounds good.
Brilliant.
I'm
Lovely.
excited. Thank you
Yeah.
thank you for today.
Thank you, Daniel, as well.
Yes.